Hello to all of you, my students in the 7th grade. This is your English teacher Dana from Ru'al Farouk Academy. Today we are going to start with a new unit in this semester. This is Unit 6. This is about Mr. Davis' workshop. So let's start, make an introduction about this unit, then start our lesson. The outcomes of our lesson today, students should be able to know the important information about the unit, recognize the main idea about the text, and read the paragraphs and answer some questions. Okay, my students, before start reading our lesson for today, this is about Mr. Duffy's workshop. Mr. Duffy's, we want to know the title of our unit and the important tips that you have to know before starting our lesson for today. The title of our unit, this is Unit 6, is What a Character. Character or characters means شخصيات. What do we mean about them and where can we find characters? What are the kinds of the characters? We can find characters in stories, plays, المسرحيات, and films. All these things have characters. What are the kinds of the characters? Yes, we have cartoon characters, ugly character, funny, hero, and scary characters. So these are the kinds of the characters. You have to know that stories are usually written تكتب in past tenses by using the past tenses أزمنة الماضي. The stories تكتب بأزمنة الماضي أحيانا أو غالبا. And in the stories we have lots of descriptions. وصف for what? For the things that we have in the stories, the characters or the things like places. So we have descriptions. How? By using adjectives. Excellent. So in our lesson we are going to know lots of the adjectives and descriptions for things. The last thing, authors اللي هم الكتاب for the stories or plays or films have several ways, العديد من الطرق of presenting a character. To show us the characters, they have several ways. What are these ways? We have two ways here, how the person looks and how the person behaves, كيف بيتصرف. And now it's time to start our lesson by reading the first paragraph and discuss it by making questions and answers. So let's start. And now open your student's book, pages 58 and 59. We have two pictures in these two pages. This is about what? Excellent, Mr. Duffy's workshop. Here we have the courtyard, اللي هي الباحة الخلفية for Mr. Duffy's workshop, لورشة Mr. Duffy's, and here we have, yes, excellent, the workshop of Mr. Duffy's. Here we have Mr. Duffy's and here, yes, excellent, this is George. And Mr. Duff is here working in his workshop, but what is the description of the stories and what is the actions that happened in the story? Now we will read the first and the second paragraph and discuss them by making questions and answers. So let's start. Mr. Duffy's workshop. ورشة Mr. Duffy's. Grandfather wanted George to go to Mr. Duffy's house. So grandfather بده جورج يروح yes, Mr. Duffy's house, لبيت Mr. Duffy's. Why? To collect ليجمع what? A present, هدية. هدية present for whom? Yes, the present was for George's little cousin. What is her name? Sally. So بده ياخد الهدية for his cousin Sally. Mr. Duffy phoned this morning. Who said that? Yes, the grandfather told George, حكاله إنه Mr. Duffy phoned this morning. حكى معي this morning. He is finished. خلص what? Finished what? Yes, the present. Making the present for the little cousin of George. Would you mind going now? هل تمانع إنك تروح الآن. George didn't mind going at all. Why? Because he loved to go to Mr. Duffy's house at any time. بحب كتير يروح لمستر Duffy's house بكل وقت أو أي وقت. He loved talking to Mr. Duffy about his work. Most of all, he was fascinated كتير مبهر أو معجب به by Mr. Duffy's tools بأدوات والequipment تاعون Mr. Duffy's بالworkshop تاعته. So, look at these two questions. Why the grandfather wanted to go to Mr. Duffy's house? Why the grandfather wanted George go to Mr. Duffy's house? Yes, excellent. To collect a present for the little cousin Sally. Was he fascinated by Mr. Duffy's tools? Was George fascinated by Mr. Duffy's tools? Excellent, yes, he was. And now let's move to the second paragraph from this story and discuss it by making questions and answers. We will read it and discuss the ideas of this paragraph. Let's start reading it. A few minutes walk brought George to a tall house. دقائق قليلة قادت جورج to a tall house. لمنزل طويل أو ضخم. And we said in this story we have lots of the descriptions that describe the things and places or characters. So here we have told the adjective that describe the house. He knocked on the old wooden door. He refers to excellent George. George knocked طرق and on the old wooden door. Also here we have the adjectives that describe the door. إذن George طرق باب خشبي قديم. After a few moments, بعد لحظات قليلة, Mrs. Duffy opened it. It refers to the door. Yes, فتحة الباب اللي هي السيدة دافي لجورج. Come along again, George, she said. She refers to excellent Mrs. Duffy. Mr. Duffy is in the workshop. Who said that? Yes, Mrs. Duffy said for George that Mr. Duffy is in the workshop. بورشته. She walked ahead of George along a short passageway and stopped at the open kitchen door. إذن هي قادت Mrs. Duffy قادت جورج لممر قصير and stopped at the open kitchen door لباب المطبخ المفتوح. George caught a glimpse of bowls of plums and peaches in the kitchen table. إذن هو أخذ caught a glimpse لمحة سريعة أو نظرة سريعة للبولز الأطباق تاعت الخوخ والدراق الموجودة بطاولة المطبخ. A delicious smell. Delicious, this is the adjective that describes the smell. الرائحة طيبة of what? Of simmering fruit. لا الفواكه المغلية. Wafted past his nose. ملأت his nose. His refers to George. Mrs. Duffy pointed to an open doorway. أشارت للopen doorway where bright sunlight fell across the single step. And she said, You know your way, don't you, George? تعرف طريقك, صحيح, يا George? So this sentence or this question indicates that Mrs. Duffy, Mr. Duffy, and George know each other very well. بيعرفوا بعض من قبل ومنيح. And now let's move to the questions about this paragraph. Look at these questions. Number 1. Describe the door that George knocked. Yes, this is the old wooden door. The pronoun it, line 2, refers to. This pronoun it refers to. Excellent, the door. What does glimpse mean? What does this word اللي هي glimpse mean? Yes, نظرة أو لمحة سريعة in English, quick look. The last question. Quote a sentence which indicates that George knows Mr. Duffy and Mrs. Duffy before. Excellent. When Mrs. Duffy said, You know your way, don't you, George? Okay, my students, we'll stop here. In the next class, we are going to complete the rest of this story. So be ready.